1904. It is the Monday podcast, which means that it's the weekend recap. Although a lot of the things that happen over the weekend are probably not going to get discussed on today's show. We'll explain that in a second due to some breaking news in Padre land from about 9 o'clock this morning. But we are live on YouTube. This is Section 1904. The Mondays are always unlocked. They are free. Everything else, all the other content is at Section 1904, access to the Discord channel. More podcasts this week. I'm just going to climb out on a limb and say that we're going to have more than 4 podcasts between Tuesday and Friday of this week. It's a busy week in sports in San Diego, and it just got a little bit busier. It was busy without the Padres news, but the Padres news is going to climb to the top of the totem here today. I'm Darren Smith. He's John Gennaro. Thank you so much. And again, if you listen to this podcast and you like it, or even if you don't like it, but you want to make it part of your routine, go to Section 1904. You can subscribe for as little as $5 per month, and you get all sorts of content and amazing opportunities to interact with a great and growing community called Section 1904. John, did you have a good weekend?
I had a great weekend, Darren. I had a great weekend. I went to a show at the Radio Shell on Friday. That was a blast. On Sunday, I watched my UCLA Bruins beat the brakes off Michigan State, and then I went to go see a great movie called One Battle After Another, and then I watched the Aztecs beat the brakes off Nevada. And Sunday, took a couple of community members, Section 1904 subscribers, for a nice bike ride through Escondido Hills to a couple breweries, had a couple small beers, and it was a beautiful, wonderful weekend. Darren, I know you haven't broken the news yet. I have to put some of these on the screen so people understand why I'm laughing. This is what the comments are looking like right now. Everyone just yelling that the Padres need to bring back Bruce Bochy. Why would they be bringing back Bruce Bochy, Darren?
Well, it was at 9 o'clock this morning that the tweet showed up on the timeline from Kevin Acee, and it said that Padres manager Mike Shildt has retired. Had to do a double, triple take here because in a world where there's a billion deep fakes and phony accounts, you don't know what to believe anymore. So is this to be believed? And in fact, it is. The Union Tribune has the story online. Mike Shildt stood in the, well, I don't know that I need to read the entirety of Acee's piece. Let me just get to the letter from Mike Shildt that was sent to Kevin Acee. It is with a heavy but full heart that I am announcing my retirement from managing the San Diego Padres. It is a decision that I have thought about during the season and became at peace with over the last 10 days. I gave every fiber of my being to help achieve Peter Seidler's vision of bringing a World Series championship to San Diego. We fell short of the ultimate goal, but I'm proud of what the players, staff, and organization were able to accomplish the last 2 seasons. The grind of the baseball season has taken a severe toll on me mentally, physically, and emotionally. While it has been about serving others, it is time I take care of myself and I exit on my terms. I'm extremely appreciative of the Padres, Peter Seidler, the Seidler family, Eric Grupner, A.J. Preller, and staff for the trust and confidence to lead this team. I'm confident I left things in a better place. However, I'm most grateful for our players. San Diego is rightfully proud of the Padres players. It is a group that conducts themselves with class, is dedicated to each other, and the common goal of winning a World Series. I love our players, and I will miss them dearly, ! After 34 years of dedicating myself to the rigors of coaching and managing, I can, with great enjoyment, look back on achieving my 2 primary goals: to help players get the most out of their God-given ability and become better men, also to win games. I move forward with a smile on my face, contentment in my soul, genuine excitement for what God has next. To the Friar Faithful, thanks for all the support. Keep rocking Petco Park. It's the best home field advantage in Major League Baseball. The team is on its way to that World Series championship that you so deserve. Respectfully, and this is beautiful, Shilty. I love that he went out saying, respectfully, Shilty. That is one of the things that people would most often comment on, is how he was such a baseball lifer through and through, that everything was a nickname, right? Johnny, Smitty, everybody had that classic baseball nickname, including Shilty, so that he signed off that literally the last word that we will perhaps hear from Mike Shildt is Shilty. John, scale of 1 to 10, how surprised were you when you saw this news this morning?
8. I mean, it was pretty high up there. I had kind of, look, here's the thing. I wrote the newsletter. I just pressed publish when we were getting started here, And when I was writing the newsletter, I wrote a sentence that was like, hey, he's managed 2 seasons for the Padres. He led the team to 90 plus wins both times. He now has managed, I think AC had this 5 full MLB seasons outside of the COVID season and the one where he came in halfway through. And he's won 90 games in all of them. That is a staggering amount of success. And this is a sport. I mean, just sports in general these days are very much about success, results. It's a results based business. He gets the results, which is why, like, I would have been more surprised if it said Padres fire Mike Shildt, but him walking away was not a thing I expected. He's still pretty young. He seemed like he's in good health, but it did make me think about, we've commented he's been really grumpy, especially this year, grumpier than the year before. And, as someone who in the last few years started going to therapy and working on myself and all that, like, I'm kind of like, hey, kudos to you, Mike Shildt, for understanding that this is kind of, even though this might be your dream job, it's kind of destroying you inside and out. And maybe you need a break from it. And maybe you walk away from the dream job to get that break, prioritizing self-care. But yeah, very surprised. You weren't as surprised?
No, I was more surprised actually. Even as the person who sat on this podcast a couple of weeks ago and said, I sort of sense that there are things that are happening, that there are some big changes that are lurking around the corner. Now, I primarily focused on the general manager of this team, the president of baseball operations of this team, AJ Preller. And some of that is due to the fact that Mike Shildt has 2 years left on his contract. And even though in a world where we're seeing a college football coach get blown out with $50 million left on a contract, whatever it is that they were set to pay Mike Shildt for the next couple of years really pales in comparison. They just got done paying Eric Hosmer $13 million a
But
year.
wait, it's worth mentioning that not only does he have 2 years left, he got a contract extension
Right.
in November. It
Correct.
hasn't even been a year.
Right. Which, again, we'll have people already texting saying, man, how bad is it down there that this guy's walking away? I'm like, well, hold on a second. I'm not even sure we've scratched the surface on some of the stuff. We haven't even heard from any of the MLB insiders. We haven't heard from Dennis Lin. It is 10:09. The only thing that we have heard is a statement from Mike Shildt that was sent to the Union Tribune. That is all we have. So I would just like to remind everybody of that is literally all that we have.
Well, and the Preller statement. And the Preller.
And there is, well, yeah, and this is the first time where I feel Preller is very likely to come back because he is quoted in the story from Kevin Acee. There is a statement. AJ Preller, we would like to congratulate Mike on a successful career. Thank him for his significant contributions to the Padres and San Diego community over the last 4 years, including consecutive 91 seasons, 2 postseason appearances as manager. His dedication and passion for the game of baseball will leave an impact on our organization. We wish him the best in his next chapter. And this part is the most important part. The search for a new manager of the Padres will begin immediately with the goal of winning a World Series championship in 2026. And I will tell you, with respect to Kevin Acee, who is a journalist, who does cover this team much closer than I've warned this over the last couple of weeks, just for speculating that I think that there were some questions about AJ Preller and his future. This is the first time where, as somebody who does want Preller to return, I've said, okay, I feel mostly good about his return here. I guarantee you're going to hear some rumors about Preller and other teams around Major League Baseball. And I will just leave it at that for this moment because it's not what we're focusing on. It is that Mike Shildt has retired. But even this morning, there are still, hey, this organization is pushing hard for Preller. Does that have something to do with the decision-making here? Does this have something to do with the dynamic? I don't know. Like I said, I even feel like this podcast almost has to be consumed live for it to make sense. Because if you listen to this at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there might be some details out there that we are unaware of as of Monday morning, when all we have is one letter that was sent to the Union Tribune and one statement from AJ Preller. That's all we have. So let us be clear about that. Let us be very, very clear about that. I think that is important, that most everything else is going to be some speculation, a little bit of guesswork, educated speculation. I think, it certainly as somebody who likes to speculate and does so, I think, on a fairly informed level. Not everybody would agree with that, but I'm fine. But I do think that there has to just be more to it than whatever this is. And I'm looking forward to seeing how some of the reporting starts to explain these circumstances. But I agree with you. Just to circle back, I do not want to. I do not want to start this by saying, thank God Mike Shildt is out of here. I know at times I think I've mostly objected to Mike Shildt's interactions with people in media settings, and I can tell you it's not just me. Maybe I'm speaking on behalf of people who have found themselves on the other side of those exchanges. There might be some truth to that. I don't agree with that approach. I don't. But this man did win 93 and 90 games, and he did take the Padres to the postseason in back-to-back years. And even if we don't necessarily love the style with which Mike Shildt managed, right? Lots of complaints in our audience and in the Padre fan base about how they used their offense, how they played, et cetera. I mean, all that sort of stuff, it goes back to the conversation about process results, right? AJ Hinch once said, nobody gives a shit about your process, man. They just care about your results.
Right.
Although here that kind of puts that theory to the test. But still, I do think it. You have to look at the results. When people look back, they're going to look at Mike Shildt coming into a situation which seemed kind of chaotic because you had this conflict between AJ Preller and Bob Melvin, and however that is viewed in Padre history, that's beside the point. In that moment, though, it was viewed as chaotic, and it was viewed as Preller and a manager, and they cannot get along. Maybe this will be another version of that. We'll wait and see. But he took over a situation that felt like it was really, really. There was a lot of palace intrigue going on here, and who was on whose side, and did this guy decide to skip town? What was going on with him, and what was going on, and why would you pick a GM over a Matt? I was a part of that conversation. You can't rewrite the history of it. It actually happened. Even if 2 years down the road, you can say, well, clearly that manager was a bozo and this guy's, he's much better. But, he took over at a time and he did steady the ship. And I do think that is important to point out because, I think that, that's what the team needed. And however he did it, John, and whether that was the players being embarrassed by what it was that happened in 2023 and Mike Shildt just happened to be the manager, and any manager, it could have been John Gennaro, any manager would have been better off because of how embarrassing 2023 was. It wasn't anybody. It was Mike Shildt. And I do think he gets credit for that. In my book, I do think that he gets credit for that. I didn't love the bedside manner. I didn't love some of the, the bullying, the perceived bullying, some of the things that you hear about how he treats people. I don't love any, but in terms of, hey, I'm a fan and all I care about is the manager and the results of the team, then, I think Mike Shildt walks out of here mostly with his head held high.
I have a shit stirring question that I'll get to in a second, but I want to get to this one first just because we're on it. I agree with everything you said. Like Bob Melvin, Mike Shildt got results. Like I said, by winning percentage, greatest manager in the history of the Padres, right? And that's nothing to sneeze at. But crap, what were you just talking about? I had a point I wanted to make.
Oh, I was talking about taking over at a time where it felt like the organization was a little bit in disarray.
No, the bedside manner. The bedside manner. This is the reason to dislike Mike Shildt, right? He picks fights with the media and he's grumpy and all that stuff. But like if you line him up next to every single NFL head coach, it's the same person.
I know, but it's not the NFL.
I know it's not the NFL, but my point is the NFL is always a bit of a trendsetter here. And the NFL very like 20, 30, 40 years ago was like, we don't care if he's an engaging personality. We don't care if the media loves him or hates him. If he wins, that's all that matters. And Mike Shildt was kind of that in baseball. And I'm actually, this is what makes me believe that it's a resignation or retirement and not like a pushing out, is that I don't know how a team like the Padres could look at a guy who had such success and be like, nah, we can't take the bedside manner. Like, this is sports in 2025. You deal with the personality if you get the results in the AJ Hinch thing. Like, no one cares about the process.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe the president of baseball operation does. I don't know the answer to that. It's not like AJ Preller has ever confided in me his true feelings about Mike Shildt. Like we all knew back in 2022, at the end of 2022, even when the team was going to the NLCS, John, I can remember asking Kevin Acee, like, that's a little bit of oil and water there. And the point being made was it works together, sort of the Doris Kearns Goodwin team of rivals kind of philosophy, right? Like maybe this is a good yin and yang that finally somebody's able to push back. And then the whole thing just blew up in 2023. So that theory went kablooey. But, here, you don't know, you don't know, but maybe there is a good balance. What we do know, though, is it would appear like AJ Preller is going to get the opportunity to hire another manager. And people are right to bring this up. Since 2015, when AJ Preller took over and inherited Buddy Black and then decided to go with Doc Roberts for a day or two, and then Pat Murphy. How about Doc Roberts and Pat Murphy being on the same staff in 2015? And now here they are in the NLCS. Andy Green took over in 2016. Jace Tingler took over in 2020. Rod Barajas had a couple of days as an interim manager. Bob Melvin, Mike Shildt, and I don't know. I don't know where this is going to go. I know that Kevin Acee has included some names in his story. You can find those if you have a subscription to the UT. Maybe we can bandy some of them about. But he is going to get another bite at the apple. It would appear that AJ Preller is going to get another bite at the apple.
Couple quick things. One, to the person in the comments fighting with me saying AJ Preller didn't hire Andy Green. I hope you just heard Darren say that AJ Preller hired Andy Green.
Yeah, why is that even dispute? What is
I don't know. This guy was in there saying no manager that Preller's ever hired has lasted more than 2 seasons. And I looked it up and I said Andy Green essentially lasted 4. And he was like, well, Preller didn't hire Andy Green. Yes, he did. We have some new quotes.
I mean, it was the first full-time manager that he hired.
Right, exactly. We have some new quotes from Mike Shildt to Bob Nightingale, who apparently probably just texted him, was like, hey, why are you retiring? Here are the Shildt quotes. Quote 1, it just took a lot out of me. I just looked in the mirror and I knew I didn't have it in I think he means me, didn't have it in me to do what it takes to lead another 90-plus win season and World Series run. I'm at peace and I look forward to the next chapter. It looks like Nightingale followed up because this is what he says. Several executives in baseball told USA Today Sports this summer that the relationship between Shildt and Preller, president of baseball operations, and his coaching staff had become strained, but Shildt denied that was the reason for his departure, saying, quote, that wasn't it. When asked if he wanted to continue managing, he said, quote, not at the moment. I need a break and I need to take care of myself.
Okay. Again, I think some of those rumors, I don't know what to do with them. I don't know that I want to fan some of those rumors because I truly don't know. I will just tell you that rumors do exist that they did not have the best relationship. But maybe that's out of habit that people say that sort of stuff. Anytime I would see that Mike Shildt was just some sort of extension of Preller, I usually would treat that with a little bit, or view that with a bit of a jaundiced eye. Maybe I would attach an emoji to it. I don't know. But, at least on the Discord channel, be like, I'm pretty sure you can find me suggesting, I think people might be overestimating the connection between these two guys. I think people might be overestimating it. And listen, I would say this as well. John, you and I have, here's the thing about Mike Shildt. I do think going back to his first season as the manager of the team, and I did not hear this from anybody with the Padres, but, sometimes you come across enough people in San Diego and people have, outside baseball connections with players and coaches and managers and executives and what have you. I do think that, Mike's gone through a couple things over the last few years that I don't really want to discuss. It's not my place to discuss what's going on in Mike Shildt's private life. The same way I wouldn't want somebody saying, hey, that guy's radio show, it kind of stinks now. Is he going through some stuff? So, I wouldn't want anybody doing that kind of thing for me. But, and I don't know that it's even a factor. But you and I have been through one of those. And, I don't know. Maybe there's something going on here. We never really know. You never really know. And it is tough to view somebody exclusively through the lens of how they perform in a fucking press conference. Right. And, there's also this, like sometimes after some of those confrontations, what I've been told is that Mike has gone out of his way to go up and find these reporters and say, hey, are we good? And does that lend itself to thinking it's performative? Maybe. But, did he just have a moment and then he wants to, I don't know. So, he leaves, but that is, I've been told that sort of stuff happened, that after some of the more popular exchanges, right, that have made the rounds on social media, even though these things aren't intended mostly for broadcast, that, he has gone out of his way to say, are we good? And it gets treated differently depending on the person. Some people are like, no, like I'm not friends with you. Like, why do you ask this question? Why do you care? But he did, and maybe that means something to the people who were on the other side of the camera.
Maybe. One last thing from this Bob Nightingale thing, and it taps into something that I want to talk about, and then I'm going to get to my shit stirring question. So it says in here, Shildt, who was earning about $2 million a year, I don't know why that's necessary to put in there, but I guess it is, says that he will immediately move from Coronado Island in San Diego back to North Carolina. This is interesting to me for two reasons. One, shit stirring, and one not. I immediately in my head was like, who are the managers who could come in and replace him? So I started looking at, who are the managers who were recently let go, who I still think are good, right? The Rocco Baldellis of the world. And one of the names that I saw that is no longer a manager is former, now Braves manager, Brian Snitker, I think his name is. I've always thought he was a tremendous manager, but he didn't get fired. He didn't resign. He didn't retire. He moved into an advisory role, kind of like what Shildt was doing before he became manager. And in the back of my head, I was like, if he's retiring because the rigors of being a manager are too much for him, why wouldn't he just slide back into an advisory role where he doesn't have to interact with the media and he doesn't have to be in the clubhouse every day and he doesn't have to travel with the team? Seems like the job he had before he was Padres manager would be the right one for him if you still want his input on these things, if you still trust his baseball knowledge, if you still want him as a part of this brain trust. He just can't physically, mentally, emotionally handle being like he said, leading a 90-win team and a World Series run right now. So that's a thing to think about. The other thing, just because you have me parsing words now, I read through this letter, and there was a name that I think is missing. When he thanked people, he thanked AJ Preller, he thanked Eric Grupner, he thanked Peter Seidler, he thanked the Seidler family, but he did not thank John Seidler. I thought it was interesting that Peter got separated from the rest of the family, but John didn't get separated from the rest of the family. And it made me wonder for a second, maybe the whole Shildt and Preller, maybe they, rumors about them not getting along or whatever. Maybe Shildt and John Seidler just weren't a fit, because there's always this, like, Mike Shildt was kind of hired by Peter Seidler type of thing, stories out there. We talked about it's a different job when Peter passes and Grupner takes over as CEO. It's a different job for AJ Preller now. Maybe it's a little different job for Mike Shildt too. Maybe he wasn't happy about it anymore.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know really that a manager has to answer a bunch of questions to ownership. But I do think it's fair that Mike Shildt, we know he was very close personally with Peter. And one would presume if you're close with Peter, you're probably close with Shildt. So, in an ecosystem now where people are paying attention to that sort of thing, maybe there's something to it, or, maybe it's just what it is on the surface. Maybe the man's exhausted. He's been through some things in his life. He's been around baseballs. He's quick to remind us for 50 plus years. I think, in terms of his resume, one of the reasons why he was considered the favorite and ended up with the job is because at that time, following the disaster of 2023, they really felt like they needed somebody who knew the inner workings of the organization, right? Because Peter was passing and there was this void in terms of leadership. And who the hell is Eric Katsenda? So you needed somebody to come in here and make sense of it all with an insider's knowledge. And some would say that Shildt has strategically put himself to be that person. But, you couldn't predict some of the stuff that happened. So however he got there is however he got there. Now, is that the same criteria here moving into 2026? I don't know. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure now that do you need somebody within, like, will a true insider, somebody who understands the inner workings of the Padres, will that person be more of a favorite than somebody who has no attachment to this organization whatsoever? I don't know that that's a standard that will be applied. I don't know that it won't be. I don't. But I do remember that, just as we're sort of going stream of consciousness here. Like I do remember that being a big feather in the cap of Mike Shildt, as opposed to somebody from outside of the organization like Benji Gill, right? That Benji Gill really didn't have any experience internally, and people felt like it was a big deal to understand what the Seidler family dynamic was, so that you weren't going to be blindsided and be like, whoa, this place has got some problems. So, like, no, they didn't want anybody blindsided by some of this stuff. Is that a standard in 2025 into 2026? Not quite clear yet. Like we said, we're recording this in the morning, and it's likely to be the expiration date on this is like, who knows how long? Who knows how long before we get more reporting? Even the stuff that you just mentioned there with Bob Nightingale is very interesting, and Bob Nightingale's also tweeting out candidates. I mean, if that's what people want to.
Well, maybe that's the way to avoid, this thing being outdated, is maybe we transition to talking about candidates.
Here's who he's mentioned: Ryan Flaherty, Phil Nevin, AJ Ellis, Scott Service, and yes, former manager and future Hall of Famer Bruce Bochy, which I think is the first name that we will talk about when we talk about potential names to replace Mike Shildt. But we can save that here while we're still processing that Mike Shildt has announced a retirement, even if the retirement is in inverted commas.
Yeah, I have been, since this news broke an hour and a half ago, every time I hear or read a name for a potential candidate, I have a yes/no list, like literally a pro-con list, and I'm just putting each candidate in either yes or no. Here, someone in the comments, Yadier Molina. It is okay. I just need to get in front of this thing that you just said. If they say we need an internal candidate because it's chaos here and we need to make sure people understand the chaos before they come in here, that's like saying the only person you can date is one of your exes because they already know all of your eccentricities. That's a terrible way to try and find a better manager than literally the most successful manager you've ever had. So I hope that's not the case.
I hope you need to put a little asterisk on that. Let's not go crazy calling Mike Shildt the best manager in Padres.
No, I know.
history.
It felt weird coming out. The highest winning percentage.
You're not going to put him in the Padre Hall of Fame.
No. And you could, I could make a case for at least two other people because they got further in the playoffs than him, right? He's going to go down kind of like Bob Melvin, just a little bit in reverse. But yeah, I really hope they don't limit themselves. If it is AJ Preller sticking around and it is AJ Preller hiring his sixth manager, I do hope they give him no strings and they go, just go find the guy who's the best for this job. Not like we need to make sure we take care of our own, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
that would eliminate someone like
really
Bochy.
hard to speculate about this stuff because I don't even know. We haven't heard from anybody. This is literally the first, besides the John Seidler, top-down organizational review. This is the first thing we've heard from them since they got eliminated. This is literally the first thing that we have heard from the organization, which, I'm sorry, and this is not to be confused with a victory lap, but it's like, okay, the longer everybody waits here, the more inclined I'm likely to believe or not believe what had been reported, that Mike Shildt was pretty much guaranteed to be back. Kevin Acee saying AJ Preller was virtually assured. He went on John and Jim and said 100%. And like, as I said on Ben and Woods on Friday, I mean, he says that in such a condescending way that like it really, it just convinces me that he's not talking to the right people. But that's Kevin's problem. Like it was never 100% for either one of these guys because there is no such thing as that. And if you haven't heard AJ Preller's name floated out there in the baseball ecosystem, then I think you're missing a rumor that maybe you don't want to spotlight, but that does exist out there, that his name is out there. The same way that if you talk to people around the sport, you would have known that Dave Roberts was living on the edge last year in the playoffs, and that the Dodgers were likely to go and hire Skip Schumacher if Dave Roberts and the Dodgers ended up losing to the Padres in the NLDS. So, I just do object to that. I do object to that style of reporting that, like, no, it's always going to be 100%. This guy was always coming back, and now this guy's always coming back. Like this is the Padres that we're talking about. You're covering the Padres. You, of all people, should know. Crazy things happen around here for whatever reason. This really is Game of Thrones. Like, it really is sort of House of the Dragon, where there's always these twists and turns for whatever reason. And, it keeps things exciting. It keeps you on your toes around here. But for anybody to say a couple of days after the end of the regular season, like, oh, yeah, everybody's just guaranteed to come back. Like, that was not the case. I mean, I just can say flat out, that was not the case. And I didn't necessarily see it this way. But again, I'm kind of curious to hear what some of the backstory is going to look like when it starts to unfold from the people that are around the club, who are really, really well sourced, and we'll figure things out.
Okay, this actually does bring me back to and I hope you don't mind me asking it this way because it's not exactly the same, but there's definitely parallels. When the Chargers were in San Diego and they were going through this with general manager AJ Smith and head coach Marty Schottenheimer. I feel like this was like 2010. No, 2006, 2006, I think. Uh, you were on the air, right? You were in San Diego, so
Yep.
you probably covered this. You were watching this from far away with the whispers about the GM and the head coach not liking each other, and then later it kind of got revealed through whispers and reporting that like Dean Spanos essentially got put in a position where he had to choose between his GM or his head coach. He chose the GM. Marty Schottenheimer was fired. Norv Turner was brought in. And, history continues on from there. But like, do you see any similarities between this, or is this just like, am I grasping because I don't have a lot of experience with stuff like this?
Between the coach and general manager, no, I don't know that it rose to that level, but I've not heard that. I do think if Bob Melvin is asking Mike Shildt about rumors that the two of them didn't get along, I think there's probably a reason for that. So, I don't know. I don't think anything that I've never heard, and that's like third hand stuff.
Bob
for
Nightingale.
Me.
You said Bob Melvin.
Bob Nightingale, right?
Yeah.
That Bob Nightingale is asking Mike Shildt about that.
Yeah, that means that he's
I've
heard it too.
That, like third hand stuff. I've never heard that from anybody who's actually privy to the relationship. A little bit about, Mike's had Mike's he's got a lot going on in his life. So maybe that's an explanation as to some of the some of the behavior that you nerds always focus on in the media. But if that's the worst thing you could say about the guy, then I think we probably could have been okay with it. But again, I think that the fact that Preller is quoted in that story is probably a good thing for people that want Preller back. Could you have both? Could it have been both? Maybe it could have been. Or maybe there was a moment where you had to make a choice. I'm not sure. Or maybe there was the very real possibility that AJ Preller's name was being floated around there in terms of other organizations being interested in his services. Maybe that's a little bit of leverage, right? We see this in college athletics all the time. These coaches that get rumored to be linked with other programs, then all of a sudden they get themselves an extension. I mean, I will recklessly speculate that the organization I heard that was interested in Preller, just so you can say you heard it here, was the Colorado Rockies. So, maybe there was this very real, like, hey, if it's not going to be here, then, we are worried about him going to another organization. Maybe the Yankees make some wholesale changes after another disappointing postseason. And AJ Preller, who grew up a Yankee fan not far from Yankee Stadium, maybe that's a place where he would find himself being courted. But it does appear like it will be another bite at the apple here in San Diego. And again, for me and only me, and I don't know about you, because maybe this game of managerial music chairs is starting to wear on people. The idea of talking about another managerial search, I got to admit, like I just picture our friends in local talk radio who have to do this for 3 and 4 hours every day for the next couple of weeks. Good luck to you guys, unless this is going to be a much quicker process. But yeah, I mean, geez, Louise, it's just like roll out the tape from a couple of years ago. But, maybe there is a little connection there. Maybe there is a little bit of that intrigue about, there was this real chance that this guy was looking into other opportunities. And I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's part of this. Maybe it has nothing to do with it.
And again, like I know you're questioning some of AC's sources and their accuracy, but AC was saying, like, not only are they not going anywhere, he's like, it's expected that AJ Preller is getting a contract extension soon. Perhaps this was part of that. I do want to ask you a question, and
perhaps it is. Again, I mean, it's also just like to leave that kind of money on the table. It's very interesting. I hope Mike is really truly at peace with this decision.
Well, okay. So this is where we might take a turn. What's your feeling on Molly Knight, who I think still works for The Athletic?
I don't have any feelings about her.
She writes about the Dodgers. She is ostensibly a reporter, a columnist.
She wrote a book about the Dodgers a couple years ago. I remember I had her as a guest on the show.
She gets a little squirrely on social media sometimes. She's willing to kind of out stuff that most reporters keep closer to the chest. She tweets out on Blue Sky, whatever, skeets out. Mike Shildt is out as Padres manager. Someone replies jokingly, quote, "The Dodgers exist, so we're firing you," unquote. She replies to that, "Nah, he quit. Big time questions about his relationship with AJ Preller." So she's implying that Mike quit because he didn't want to deal with Preller anymore, which is a whole other angle that I think is silly. But and I don't think you leave that kind of money on the table because you're like, I don't like working with this guy. But who knows? I do think there's a question there is like if
So
the
that's the
Padre,
second time we heard it this morning, right? Bob
yeah,
Nightingale asked Mike Shildt about it, and now Molly Knight has written about it.
right. And I do think there's a point here where maybe the Padres were like, "Hey, AJ, we really want to offer you a contract extension." And maybe he was like, "I'm interested in extending, but like not really with this guy as the manager." And maybe they factored that in and they were like, "All right, is it important enough for us to have AJ sign this 5-year extension that we're willing to let him pick another manager?" Votes, yes. Okay, fine. Sorry, Mike. Like maybe he did. Maybe this isn't a retirement. Maybe this is a pushing out a little bit. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know if we'll ever
I
know.
don't know then why Mike would frame it the way that he did on his way
And write
out.
the letter and all
These
that.
things are always possible. As a friend of mine who's been around this a lot once said, let me make sure I get the words right. I'll never be shocked to be surprised. Like, and it's just sort of the way it is when it comes to the Padres. You can never be shocked. You can never be shocked if you're surprised. And that's just the way things go around here. So I mean, is that possible? Yeah. Is it also possible that it's tough to be a manager that works for AJ Preller? I suppose that's possible too. I suppose that is a very, very possible. Maybe that this is just a really, really difficult job when you work for somebody who is, this who has, absolutely whose batteries are never low. Like his gas tank is just never empty. It's just like you said, like he is truly that shark that only knows how to swim forward. He doesn't ever stop. Sharks only move in one direction. They only move forward, and that's AJ Preller. And maybe that's not for everybody. Even if you think it is, after a couple of years, you're like looking around going, geez, man, I am exhausted here. This is really, really tiring. Not everybody could do the Bob Melvin thing. It's like they would just turn the phone off at night and be like, fucking don't bother me. Like not everybody does that. And, maybe there is a little bit of something to that. I wish I knew more about it. I can only tell you what I know, contrary again to what people have suggested. I don't make this stuff up. But maybe I do think working with him does take a little bit of a toll. It can take a little bit of a toll, especially if you're like 57 years old and you're living thousands of miles away from home, and you've had some real life situations change. I suppose it's possible, but I also suppose it's possible too that that Preller found himself with a little bit of leverage to say, if we're going to move forward here, and if I'm not going to go pursue other opportunities, then there has to be a certain way that I want things done. I mean, that's what I think is going to be so interesting about the next managerial hiring, right?
Yeah.
Because I can create two theories right now out of total thin air. And again, this is just me. This isn't based on anything. I could paint a scenario where you do have Mark Loretta and Jake Peavy who report to the CEO, right? We talk about the dynamic with the CEO and the president of baseball operations. At times being in alignment, other times maybe you're kind of curious. So I can see that those two guys will go, hey, we've both played for Bruce Bochy. Bringing back Boch would be a great idea. I could also see AJ Preller going, we've been grooming AJ Ellis for a long time. He's been part of our baseball operations department for a long time. And we have viewed him as somebody who we think eventually he's going to be a really good manager. Clayton Kershaw has been talking about AJ Ellis as a manager since AJ Ellis was Kershaw's personal catcher. So this guy, if he wants it, unless he might have kids in school, he lives in the Midwest or whatever. So, he comes with, you can roll your eyes at that, but it comes with a level of credibility that I think would exist inside of the clubhouse. Maybe not on Twitter, but inside of the clubhouse, I think it would have a level of credibility. But ultimately, like, what kind of manager they're going to settle on, to me, is going to be one that's going to be very, very telling about how the Padres operate. So
All right,
I don't know. I mean, I could see it going in a million different directions, but I think that's part of the fascination of being around the Padres, being a Padre fan or covering the Padres is like there's always the surface level stuff, and then there's always the man, like, so who's going to make this hire exactly? Like, that's very interesting. Is it somebody as simple as, hey, who's the right hand man? Who's sitting in that dugout every single day? It's Ruben Niebla. Do you want to elevate a pitching coach to be a manager? Again, like,
personally, no.
Personally, I don't disagree with you. But I mean, I wouldn't say that there's anybody. I would say of the candidates that have been tossed out there, the one that I'm probably least interested in is somebody who will be a perceived favorite in this, and that's Scott Service. But Scott Service was a guy who was interviewed years ago for this job and ended up with the Seattle Mariners. Now, the rumor at that time was that AJ Preller was just doing a favor to the Mariners by interviewing Scott Service, since he didn't have a lot of other interviews that were lined up. So I'm not sure. I don't know that, but maybe there is a little bit more that you like there. Again, and I will go back to something that we said when we talked about the end of the regular season. Mark Loretta made it very, very clear before Jace Tingler was hired publicly. I don't know that this is Mark's current position in life, but Mark made it very clear that he wanted to be a manager and did want to interview with the San Diego Padres, and I don't think he ever got that interview. Now he turned up to be the CEO, the special assistant to the CEO. So, does he have internally some sort of avenue to put his name back into the hat? I guess we'll find out. But again, if you're going back to who's actually calling the shots, if you didn't want to interview him 5 years ago, what makes you want to interview him today? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be a manager, like, go manage. Go manage in the minors. Go be a bench coach. Don't sit in a CEO's office. Like, that's not gonna. The players are gonna. Whatever. I have a weird conspiracy theory that I want to throw at you. This has to do with my very poor financial decision to offer as much money as I have to anyone who can tell me who AJ Preller was on the phone with after Game 3. And this is why. You skipped over this part, and I know why you did it. You don't need to read the whole thing. But the beginning of this AC article is crazy to me. Quote from, I'm just quoting AC. Mike Shildt stood in a corner of the visiting clubhouse at Wrigley Field after the Padres' final game of 2025. He spoke in a soft voice about the love he had for his players and the culture that had been built in his 2 seasons as manager. He was devastated and proud and tired, and he was done. He was fairly certain of that as he looked around the room that night after a 3-1 loss to the Cubs in Game 3 of the National League Wildcard Series. 9 days later, Shildt made his retirement official. Okay, we talked about Jake Peavy going on MLB Network and saying, like, I wouldn't have started Darvish. I would have started King. And I think I said on the podcast, like, I wonder if maybe Shildt went into that going, you're not going to tell me who my starting pitcher is. And if it blows up in my face, it's my ass. Maybe he made the call on Darvish, and maybe Preller and Peavy and Seidler and Grupner were all on the other side going, dude, this is your ass if this doesn't work out well. And he's like, I know. If it doesn't work out, it's my ass. And maybe it was his ass. Because I find it very weird that at the end of that playoff game, he knew he was done. I find that to be odd and very fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, we got accused of reading too much into that moment on MLB Network. And I thought it was significant. I do. I'm sorry. I still do. And I think Jake was probably holding back. Knowing Jake a little bit like I do, I think Jake was actually holding back and wanted to go further in that conversation about who should have started game number 3.
Yeah.
And then when you get the notification from John Seidler talking about the thorough review of the organization, you want to be one of 2 people in that. Do you want to be the person getting reviewed, or do you want to be the person who's doing the reviewing?
Yes.
Because I know which group I want to be in. I want to be in the group that is doing the reviewing. And right now I've had a special assistant to the CEO go on MLB's own network and say, we got that one wrong. And, who does that fall on? Which is why we did an entire show on that. Again, people can be dismissive of that moment as being, but when you get all these little things, when you get all these little tiny things, they do start to add up. And it sounds like you're just off on some wacky conspiracy case, but this is the Padres. Like, this is the way these operate around here. And I did think that that was significant because even if for nothing else, you don't want to be a person who's walking around going, man, I got people out there that are saying this sort of stuff. I'm the one that made that decision. Like, what is the impact on you, Darvish, when you have Jake Peavy out there saying that sort of thing?
Yes.
So, I do think that again, do I think that that was the reason why Mike Shildt decided to hang it up? I don't know. But do I think that you can interpret some of this stuff as maybe why it is so tiring, why sometimes this job, it's exhausting to be a baseball manager. I don't care where you are. You could be in Miami, you could be on a team with no expectation, but it is demanding. And it is a really, really demanding environment here. And you also have other elements like a bit of uncertainty still at ownership. Who's the chairman, et cetera. We don't know that thing has been settled. I've not seen any resolution out there. And that's just it's a moment where you go, huh, okay, I'm going to tuck that one away, because that was directly somebody who is on MLB Network as an analyst, but also presented as an employee of the Padres, and his title is special assistant to the CEO. And he's telling an audience of however many people watch that channel, probably not many, but he is telling an audience like, I don't think we did that right. And then we're doing this review. Well, okay, now who's doing the review? These are questions we never get any answers to. So you got to sit here and babble like a fucking idiot on this podcast every day. Be like, well, who's doing the reviewing? And maybe that is a small little part. This is all so tiring. It's all so tiring.
But also,
this guy's going to be in our clubhouse next year. And, now I know that people maybe don't agree. I didn't object to that decision. I didn't. And I know it's easy to look back and say, well, Michael King should have X, Y, Z. There are 19 pitches in that game. I don't even know that we got an explanation on that one, John.
We did not.
So again, like the list of things that need to be asked or that should be asked, I mean, it's from here, from Imperial Beach to your house. But we're just not going to get a lot of answers to some of these questions.
And for people in the comments, and for those times when I've been the conspiracy theory on this podcast saying maybe he didn't retire, maybe he got pushed out. If he did, I'll the counter argument here. The Padres better win 90 plus games next year. And that's going to be harder to do because they're losing probably Michael King, probably Dylan Cease, probably Luis Ariz, probably Ryan O'Hearn. And now, after 2 straight years of 90 plus wins with the manager who basically guarantees you 90 plus wins, and you're a team that now, for the first time, has done back-to-back 90 plus win seasons, you better win 90 games next year.
I don't know.
If they bring in AJ Ellis and he wins 84 games, you telling me we're not going to be sitting around going, maybe Mike Shildt could have gotten...
Do they go to the playoffs?
I mean, that's...
Yeah, I mean, I remember saying this, and my answer, I'm not trying to swat you down here.
No, it's fine. I was just...
But my answer is usually, or what? He better win 90 games, or what? Because I remember saying this. I remember saying when Bob Melvin walked out the door, and you're bringing Mike Shildt in. I remember saying this on radio, and it sounds profound, but then, again, I'll ask myself the same question, or what? Well, Mike Shildt better get them to the NLCS. Or what?
I mean, I'm assuming the or what. See, and I was wondering this earlier.
Because I thought that was the standard that was left by Bob Melvin, which is why when people sort of, celebrated and tap danced on Bob's grave, and they're like, good, get this bozo out of here, sleepy Bob. So when people did that, I was like, well, I'm sorry. Like, he was a manager who helped get this team to the NLCS.
Okay,
right?
But...
Like, the grass isn't always greener. But I'm also old enough to remember people celebrating Bruce Bochy exiting out of the organization because people felt like its time had run and come and gone. And again, it's a much easier thing to do back now, 20 years after the fact. But I mean, what if he doesn't win 90? What if they win 85? What if they aren't pushing, max bullpen innings every single game, every single day? And you're a better team in the playoffs. I think I understand the temptation to say that sort of stuff, but I also think the whole overall context is probably pretty important to see. Like, are we still talking about the Padres in the playoffs a year from now, even if they won 85 games? Then I don't think anybody's going to care that they didn't get 90. You know,
But okay, you say that, and I'm not talking about you and me. You and me will understand. But you and me also understood to continue this comparison, you and me also understood that in 2007, Norv Turner took that team to the AFC Championship game, I believe, after going 11-5. And every Charger fan was still saying we fired 14-2 Marty Schottenheimer for 11-5 Norv Turner. And I'm like, you got further in the playoffs. That was the point. Marty couldn't win on the playoffs. They got a guy who could. You won playoff games. And they were like, that 14-2 team, they would have won. They would have won if not for Jeff Fisher knocking out Sean Merriman's knee. And it's like, I think from the narrative sense, the casual fans, I think it will matter. I think it's going to be a measuring stick for casual fans of whoever we get, can they win 90 games? Can they win 90 games? Because it's been forced down their throat back-to-back 90-win seasons. All this guy does is win 90 games.
Right.
So from a narrative sense, I do think people will care. I don't think you and I will care, but I think we'll be dealing with a bunch of people who care about it.
Yeah, I mean, careful what you wish for, right? I mean, the Cardinals got rid of this guy after a couple of years, after back-to-back 90-win seasons. Interrupted. There was the sandwich year or the COVID year. I'm just conveniently excluding that from this conversation. And the Cardinals done. I mean, feels like the Cardinals are as irrelevant as they have been in my entire life.
I mean, the year after he left, they were awesome. Goldschmidt won the MVP. Arenado finished third in the MVP. I think they went kind of far in the playoffs. I don't remember them being in the NLCS though. So
I don't remember. I mean, it feels like they've been a bit off the radar.
They were fine for 1 year and then they fell off a cliff.
Yeah, and maybe thinking back to some of the words that John Seiler used, like, we came up short in certain areas. Maybe going back to lefties. Maybe that was another thing that I don't know.
Maybe John Seiler's not a bunting fanatic.
Maybe he's not. Maybe he's somehow secretly one of the people on our Discord channel who passes around the "we gonna fucking bunt" meme all the time when it comes to Mike Shildt. So
someone just threw out another potential manager name. I don't know what side to put this on, so I might not write it down yet. Someone threw out Fernando Tatis Sr., who I know I talked about as being a potential hitting coach for this team. I gotta put him down as no for manager. I don't know that he's got the resume to be a manager of an MLB team.
I don't know about that one either. I mean, I'll give you another name who started his career with the Padres, whose name has been floated out there.
I bet he's on my list. Let's check.
Nick Hundley.
Shit, not on my list. Because you told me you thought he was getting the Giants job, but that's still
I just read that. I read that on Twitter. I don't.
You said you read on Twitter that maybe he was getting the Giants job. That's still good.
I don't have
people
any
still want Bochy
on that. I mean, I like Nick and have always liked Nick. Had a good relationship with him when he was a player. He's been a regular guest on the show. Still lives in San Diego. He used to every time we did that Rady children's give-a-thon at iHeart, Nick would be listening to the show and he would call in and he would tell a story about Rady Children's Hospital. So I do think, unless I've missed something over the last year, I think Nick is still pretty dialed in San Diego. He got here as a player, came up through the system, and I don't think he ever left. I'm pretty sure that Nick Hundley still lives in San Diego. Now, does that mean that he should be the next manager? No, but it is somebody who is here, somebody who played with Jake Peavy. I don't think he ever worked in the organization. I think after his playing days were done, he went to the MLB front office. And then he was with the Texas Rangers, and he's been with the Texas Rangers and Chris Young over the last couple of years. But I think that would be a name I'd be certainly open to. I think I'd be open-minded to that. Somebody who's been in a World Series winning organization with the Texas Rangers.
How's his Spanish?
I don't know.
I think that's important.
It is and it isn't. I mean, it is until it doesn't matter at all. How's Bruce Bochy's Spanish?
I don't know. Probably not great.
Don't think it's great. So, I do think it matters, if you have a clubhouse that, is structured a certain way, but I don't, these guys made it as far as they have since 1998 with Bob Melvin. And that was a very, very heavy Spanish speaking clubhouse. So I think, you can trick yourself into believing it has to be one thing or another. And then you end up limiting yourself in certain categories.
I am eyeing potential candidates through the lens of, can they get Manny on their side, or is Manny going to be on the other side? And I do feel like it's important to get Manny on your side, and I think that's going to be easier if it's a former player. That's important to me.
Yep.
And potentially if it's a manager who can speak more than just English.
I think it just matters. I mean, Manny's English is fine. It is his first language. Manny wasn't born.
That's true. He's from Florida. He's from Florida. But, you know, no, you're right. You're right. I'm just thinking like that collection of the clubhouse that seems to hang out together. They sometimes they're not speaking English, and you can see those guys kind of gravitating towards Ruben Niebla, even though he's the pitching coach. They seem to like him and find him in celebrations, and they're hanging with him in the dugout and all that. So yeah, not as important as being a former player. I think it has to be a former player.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that's, you know, the things that we know are important to Manny: posting, tenure. You know, these are things that matter to Manny. You know, so
stats.
Yeah, you know, remember when it was that Jurickson Profar and Will Smith got into it, and Manny didn't object that you know, that there was this back and forth and this confrontation at the plate. It's like, how do you not respect a guy that's got 10 years in the show? You know, like, like those are the things. He's really in the service time. Like he's really into that sort of stuff. So I think the first thing one of the things that's why I thought a couple of years ago, partial as I might be, and I will totally admit when I am partial about something. That's why I thought Nevin would be an interesting candidate, because I think a guy like Machado would look at Nevin and be like, red ass, high prospect, top 5 pick, right? Like 10 years in the show.
I thought about Nevin, and the thing that kept me from saying that name earlier was I was like, man, he would probably hate Preller, right? They would like, it seems like
sometimes it's, you know, you don't know. Sometimes you think that, but he's also interviewed here before. So I'm not sure.
Under Preller,
does he want to go through that process again? I'm not entirely clear about that. It's not like I've reached out or sent out any feelers on it.
Hey, since we're an hour into this and talking about your friends, one of my favorite things has always been one of my favorite things, but it's become more common now across all sports, but specifically in the NBA and Major League Baseball, is players who retire from playing and then immediately slide into a head coaching job. I love those guys. Like, I just feel like there's something about that dynamic that really, really works for whatever reason. You think Hedges has another season in him, or you think he might be looking for a job in a dugout somewhere? He's probably got some Spanish.
Yeah. I mean, how can you not? Just being around as many Spanish speaking pitchers,
right?
I don't know.
Yeah, no, you can't speak for him, but
I can, and also, I mean, we haven't talked in years. So
no, I know.
I don't carry on any relationship with him.
I'm making jokes, but he is.
I think he will be a manager.
He's one of the first names I wrote down on my list, and I put him under the yes category because I was like, the only thing Austin Hedges wasn't able to do was hit consistently. Everything else he was great at, and I'm like, that seems like the type of guy who could turn into a Bruce Bochy.
By the way, don't you think Scott Service would be a little bit of a tough sell while we're watching the Seattle Mariners 3 wins away from going to the World Series?
Yeah, they were very successful under him, just not in.
I don't have it in front of me. I'd have to look it up.
The winning percentage, they were successful, but they always had the Astros in their division, so it was harder for them. And then the Rangers were good for a couple years there, so it threw them off. But like, yes, I was thinking the same thing earlier. I was like, really, do I want the guy who, like, the Mariners got rid of him and they're immediately so much better? But you know, he didn't have Cal Raleigh hitting 60 home runs or whatever. Maybe that's his fault, or maybe it's just unlucky timing.
Yeah, I mean, that's let's see. Second, third, fifth, third, second. Went to the playoffs one time.
Yeah.
Lost to Houston.
As people throwing out
in a 5-game series.
God, there's so many names in the chat. I'm just gonna throw these names at you. You can give me yes, no,
we
or
have
nothing.
So many more weeks of
I know, but those are gonna be serious names. These are unserious names. Yadier Molina. I don't think so.
Does he want to manage? Didn't he manage the Puerto Rican
He did.
national team?
He did.
And the World Baseball Classic.
He did. Just like people are throwing out Mark DeRosa for a couple of things because he managed Team USA in the World Baseball Classic.
I think he's a really good communicator. I think he's really good on MLB Network.
I love him on MLB. He's my favorite part of MLB Network. This one's funny to me. I see where this is going. Former Padres catcher, speaks Spanish, knows the clubhouse. Your 2026 Padres manager, Jorge Alfaro.
Oh, let's fucking go San Diego.
Let's fucking go.
That'd be the first thing he said at his press conference. You'd have to be on the dump button at 97.3 and 760.
Yeah, that'd be funny.
Yeah,
Preller bringing in a guy who he scouted and brought into baseball with the Rangers to be his manager. That would be funny. This guy hates the Ryan Flaherty rumors. This guy said Albert Pujols. I don't think so.
I thought he was in line to be the manager
somewhere.
of the Angels.
Angels? I think that's right. Which, by the way, I just learned this morning while doing all this that Ron Washington had like triple bypass surgery in the middle of the season. Jesus Christ, get healthy, Ron.
Mm-hmm.
What
about it didn't work as a player, but what about Nelson Cruz?
You know, that name keeps popping into my head as like half of this clubhouse was like, we'll do anything. Get us Nelly Cruz in the clubhouse. It would be unifying. And you know what I complained about with Shildt? Oh, funny point that Molly Knight made. Don't let me forget to come back around to this. But what I want from a manager to come in, we talked about this the other day about trying to make bunts fun. I want a dugout that has fun. I'm watching all these teams in the playoffs, and all these dugouts are fun as hell. And like some of them have like fun toys, fun jackets, fun celebrations, but they're just fun. They're having fun. And like Mike Shildt's dugouts never seemed to have fun. The results were there, but they just never seemed like they were having fun. It felt oddly like a Tony La Russa team in that way. What was the Molly Knight? Oh, Molly Knight posted the video of that got Jose Iglesias suspended and Xander Bogaerts fined, where they're yelling at the umps and kind of going after the umps after Game 3. And Molly said, if Mike Shildt never manages again, this is the last thing that he'll be known for. The very last thing he'll be known for is his team going after the managers after losing a playoff game. And I've been thinking about that moment a lot in terms of Shildt. And we've seen with the lip reading where he's like, hey, I run a great dugout. My guys never complain. They never fight. I run a great dugout. My guys don't get thrown out. We're very well behaved. It would be a little funny if his managing career ended with his players just losing their mind and going after the umps.
Yeah. Again, I don't know. Feels like a detail to me. I mean, it's not like they dragged the umpire down the dugout and beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, they probably wanted to.
I mean, they just yelled at the guy a little bit. Does Trevor Hoffman want to manage? Today's Trevor Hoffman's birthday, by the way. Happy birthday,
Trevor.
Yeah. He just, it's absolutely not. Trevor is way too smart to be a manager. He's in no possible way. Trevor's gonna.
No,
Trevor's got a great life, man. He's not gonna be managed.
He's gonna wake up, surf, go watch that game at a bar somewhere.
Moises Alou. I guess we'll do the Moises Alou thing again. I suppose it should be a name that should be considered. But I mean, we're not sleeping on it as much as like we've been through it like 3 times. Moises Alou's name was out there, and I mean at least 2020 with Tingler that I can remember. And then into Melvin, into Shildt. Like, how many times are we just going to toss the same guy out there? Is this just we're playing the long game, waiting for, and last I heard Moises had some family stuff, not in a bad way, like, kids of a certain age and didn't want to be all the way halfway across the world.
Sure.
So maybe the situation has changed. You always have to know what's going on in a person's life too. If people have ended their careers and live in another place and their kids are of a certain age, it's not as simple as just drop everything to come manage the San Diego Padres.
Right.
Especially when you're not even sure, like, how good is this job? Is this a really good job? On the surface, I think you'd have a lot of people interested in it, but
also, you're going to move your family to San Diego for baseball to get shut down in a year?
Yeah. Interesting piece that Jeff Passan just posted about how the results of the Milwaukee Brewers and Dodgers series is a little bit of a referendum on where the sport might be headed with its labor situation. That a team that's at the top of the payroll chart is taking on a team that's middle of the road, 16th, 17th in the Milwaukee Brewers. So, perhaps this is either going to be proof that baseball's economic system is completely broken and the Dodgers will advance, because that's what that will prove somehow, or it'll prove that the system actually isn't broken because the Brewers have figured out a way to get through it. I don't know that I think it's that simple or reductive reasoning, but I think it's a fair point, and Jeff
And
Passan's
then
is a pretty good reporter.
in the AL, it's so in the NL, it's number 1 against number 14. In the AL, it's number 5 against number 16. So go underdogs, I guess.
I guess so. I guess, and yeah, it's just interesting that the Padres are searching for a manager while two guys who were on staff here 10 years ago are facing off against one another. I don't, and I brought up the Pat Murphy stuff over the weekend, not because, just because I think it's a good story. Like, truly, it's not like an indictment on the organization. If anything,
Pat's
I think
the
it's
most
credit.
fascinating guy in baseball. Like,
I think it's a credit to Preller for identifying something in Pat Murphy, but the timing was bad. Timing was just not good. But all these years later, I will say, I always thought that Pat Murphy was a guy that was gonna. If you would have asked me late 2015. I would have guessed that Pat Murphy would have been laughed out of Major League Baseball, because I remember standing on the field at Petco Park, and I was on the visiting side, visiting clubhouse, and Pat Murphy was standing in front of the Dodgers, or in front of the Padres dugout on the other side of the field. And no, that was not Freudian, because it wasn't the Dodgers. And I remember people like, that guy is a clown. And everybody in your dugout talking to me is saying, he's just a college rah-rah kind of guy, and none of them want to play for him. Clubhouse, not fans. Coaching staff, not fans. And the whole thing just kind of blew up. But I think it's such a cool thing that Pat Murphy stuck around and said, like, I am determined to figure out a way to get back. And here he is. And he's now 4 wins away from the World Series. I think that's a really, really cool story. Way more than it is an indictment. If anything, it's maybe a little bit of an indictment on the lack of professionalism inside of that clubhouse that year in 2015.
Yes.
And timing being rather important, that you just can't elevate a guy from your minor league system and say, hey, you're in charge of this place now. You're in charge of Matt Kemp and Justin Upton and James Shields and Craig Kimbrell. Anyhow, I do think that there's a subplot to the Padres looking for another manager when a couple of guys, circumstances being what they were, have come through the organization in the last decade, 10 years ago. It's a long time.
I also I before he was the manager of the Brewers, I found Pat fascinating for, the fact that he came in to the Padres, did what he did, and then didn't disappear back to college baseball, which I think is what everyone was assuming he would do. And I find it even more fascinating that the Brewers had so much success under Craig Counsell that the Cubs were like, we have to literally back up the Brinks truck to his house so we can get Craig Counsell to come here and manage the Cubs. And the Brewers are just as good, if not better, with Pat Murphy running things instead of Craig Counsell. And it just goes to show you, like, sometimes the credit is the organization and not the man. And that is a thing worth saying here with Shildt too. Like, yes, back-to-back 90-win seasons. It's also probably two of the best rosters in the history of the Padres organization. Like, so there is hope here, but the problem with a guy retiring after winning 90-plus games in back-to-back seasons, problem with bringing in a new manager is, like, you don't know what you're going to get. It's the Schrodinger's cat of managers. Like, you might get someone who comes in and it turns really bad, like the Pat Murphy situation did. Or you get someone to come in and they get the same results as Shildt in the regular season. The vibes are better. They carry him on into the playoffs, and it's great. My question.
Yeah, I mean, again, maybe also some of the success is due to this nickname that the Brewers have picked up, which is the Average Joes, right?
Right.
I mean, maybe Pat Murphy in some ways, respectfully, is the perfect person to lead a group like that, not a team full of big personality superstars.
Yes, I don't know that he's managing one of the top 5 payrolls in exactly the same way that he's managing this one. My question to you: when teams hire head coaches, managers, whatever, oftentimes, I don't know if this has been the case in the past, oftentimes they'll bring in their superstar players who are signed for a long period of time for a lot of money and go, we want your input on this, right? We don't want to hire a guy. We hire AJ Ellis and tomorrow Fernando Tatis goes, actually, I hate that guy. Trade me. They don't want to do that. So my question to you is, like, where's the line here? Who are they bringing in player wise and bouncing stuff off of? And who who could kill a hire, right? Like which Padres player, if Nick Pivetta goes, I really don't want to play for, hold on, let me find a name on my list. Nick Hundley. Are they going to go, all right, we can't do it, Nick Pivetta's mad? Like, is that the line, or is the line Tatis and Machado and nobody else? Is Merrill a factor here? Like, how much, you've been through this a couple times now, how much does AJ Preller weigh the feelings and thoughts of the Padre players into this?
It's a tough thing to answer, because like we talked about the hitting coach, and there was input from Xander Bogaerts on the hitting coach, right?
Yes.
Now, does that mean that Xander, that they saw some benefits to hiring, who was it? What's his name? Why am I drawing a blank on the hitting coach's name?
Victor Rodriguez.
Yeah. So, like, oh, and also he had some success with Xander. So, so of course you're going to ask him for his opinion. I don't think you're going to ask Nick Pivetta for much of anything. I just don't, respectfully towards Nick. I don't know what kind of credibility Manny has in this organization. I think Peter certainly would have said, what do you think? I think Preller is as I've understood him to be over the years. And again, now with the presumption that he will continue in his the capacity. I do think, I don't know, man. I don't know where Manny's at right now. I mean, does Manny, even based on his last, I think you're going to want some input as to what it is that he feels like it might be important into the clubhouse. But I don't think you're going to say, Manny, here's a list of 3 names, scratch one of them off.
But do you think he could jump in front of like another, call it rookie manager, like a Nick Hundley, like someone who doesn't have experience managing?
That's a good question. It's a really good question. I think that's something that you're going to have to talk about. I think that's, I think if you were though, I mean, again, let's go back to, AJ Ellis will be a rookie manager too.
Right.
But will Manny respect the career, right? Will Manny respect the person's career, even if it doesn't have a resume of coaching under it? I think probably.
Maybe, but it doesn't mean he won't start questioning them pretty quickly. I do think there's probably betting odds somewhere on this. I don't hate the Bochy thing, because I do think Bochy could come in and just, how did Norv Turner used to put it? Pound the ring on the table. He would bring the ring rings. and he just hit the rings on the table, and they all know that you have the thing that they want, which means you know how to get it. I think that could go a long way. I've talked myself into Bochy.
Ending it where it began. And here's the one other thing too. Bruce Bochy doesn't have to do anything. Bruce Bochy can go, hop on a boat to Cabo.
Absolutely.
And his career could be totally done, but he hasn't retired. I think it's important to point out he has not retired.
Really? What did he?
Have I missed it? Or
it was a mutual parting of ways with the Rangers, right?
Correct. I'm just trying to scroll through here real quick, because I remember asking Bruce Bochy about this when he was still managing. Bruce Bochy's career record is 2,252 wins, 2,266 losses. He is a .498 winning percentage regular season manager with 4 World Series titles, who is a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame.
Is he 14 games under 500? Did I have that right?
He did tell me that bothered him.
Being under 500?
Yes.
You know what? I love Bochy because he's a normal person on the outside who's still a crazy coach in his head.
Yeah.
Like that is exactly the type of thing that would just bother the shit out of a manager.
Yeah, and the reason he's under 500 is because he was the manager for a lot of those lean years between 1999 and 2004.
Yeah.
When the Padres were not investing any money in this organization. And wouldn't there be something very poetic about bringing Bruce Bochy home to retire over 500 with another run at a postseason? I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little too romantic about this.
Bench
but
coach
it is,
Mark
to your
Loretta?
point, like he is, there's a very famous, the reason I ever even brought it up with him is because I remember a line that Mickey Mantle used, which he finished, one of the all-time great players. But his career ended, I think, at 298. And Mickey Mantle used to say, all the way up until his death, he's like, I was a 300 hitter. Like, That guy had 536 home runs and 1,300 runs batted in, and 7 World Series or whatever it was. And he's like, one of the greatest baseball careers of all time. And he's like, to this up until his dying breath, he's like, I can't believe I finished my career under 300. I'm not saying it's that dramatic with Boch, but I know, like he said, yeah, that under 500 thing. I was rooting for him this year. They were 81 and 81, and had a lot of injuries with the Rangers. But I don't know. I think that there's reason, at least, to until he is totally out of this conversation. I think there's reason to at least think that it is a possibility, slim as the odds might be.
Well, that would allow you the opportunity to take someone like an AJ Ellis or a Mark Loretta, who you maybe are grooming to be a manager someday, but doesn't have the experience of being in the dugout with the guys every day, the grind and all that yet. And you go, all right, Boch, you got a couple years left. Let's get you over 500. And then you can walk out the door a happy man, and Loretta or Ellis or someone else, Nick Hundley, slides in and takes the manager role. I could see that being a plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's also a question of again, whose input is ultimately like who ultimately somebody is going to have to make the decision. I can tell you, John, even on the day where Mike Shildt is announcing that he is retiring, I can't tell you for certainty that this was 100% AJ Preller's hire. I don't know that to be true. This might have been one of those organizational decisions where he might have been pushing for Ryan Flaherty, and somebody said, hey, we can't go from Mike Shildt or from Bob Melvin to Ryan Flaherty. Like, it just doesn't I don't know, it doesn't jive. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But sometimes these organizations arrive at these decisions in different ways, and I don't know, like I truly don't know who will have the most input here, and who will carry the most weight when it comes to making this decision. I would think John, group, AJ, I mean, it's kind of hard to know, so I don't know. All I know is things will change because it's the Padres, and it always seems to happen. I have to get my car serviced at noon, so I got about 10 minutes ish or so. If we want to touch on anything else, or do we want to just leave this as a standalone podcast for the day?
You know what? That's we have.
I feel bad that we're shortchanging San Diego State on the big win against Nevada.
That's what I was gonna say. We've done 100 minutes on the Padres. Let's for dessert do a couple minutes on the San Diego State Aztecs football team, because I do feel like they deserve it. I do feel like this is a moment for them. This is a step up for them. And I don't think they should be ignored. That was a hell of a performance from San Diego State on Saturday. I mean, the quarterback looked really good. The running backs all looked really good. The defense looked suffocating. Jordan Napier's a star. It's all coming together for Sean Lewis. Like, I know. And I didn't even mention Washington State almost knocked off who? They were playing like the number 5 team in the country. Ole Miss, and they almost beat them. And I was like, oh man, this like a perfect San Diego State weekend would have been Washington State winning that game against Ole Miss, and then San Diego State doing what they did to Nevada. But yeah, San Diego State is an exciting football program right now, and that's gonna last until they play Fresno State in like 2 weeks. And then they're either going to get a lot more exciting or a lot less exciting based on how that game goes. But I'm in. I'm all the way in on the Aztecs. I'm happy that I decided, like, before even week 1, like, I'm watching the Aztecs. I'm rooting for the Aztecs. I'm excited for the Aztecs. This has been a really fun and rewarding season, and it does feel a little bit like Sean Lewis is building something.
It does. And of course, it's the tricky part about college athletics, right? It's like, okay, have some success, but not too much success. I can't have Penn State coming knocking on the door here, but that's a bridge we don't need to cross today. Yeah, I mean, listen, you can always say, well, it's Nevada. Nevada isn't any good. I think the best thing is you're going to Fresno State, and that feels like it's going to be a pretty big game, because Fresno State, I say unfortunately, but they did lose this past weekend. So they're, but you do have an opportunity to move ahead of them. When you look ahead at the schedule, you do say, okay, it sets up for a big game against Fresno State. They've scored 90 points in 2 weeks. They did the things against the teams that you had to beat handily. They've done that. They won on the road. That was one of the question marks that people had too. Can this team really have a big time performance away? They did it in Reno. I know they haven't exactly played a murderer's row, but they've played a schedule that I don't know that I thought would. What are they, 5-1, 5-1? So I'm not. They're on top of the standings, and they still have Boise State. They don't have to play UNLV. So you start looking ahead a little bit, and you start looking ahead of that Fresno game, and it feels like the stakes are significant because you beat them, then you're a couple of games up in conference, and you have the bullet of the tiebreaker. So you're starting to set yourself up here, and again, I don't think UNLV is on the schedule, but Boise State is. So you at least are starting to build a pretty good looking resume and a win away from bowl eligibility, which I think matters. I think people around town don't. Um, it certainly is it has been a huge step in the right direction. And after week 2 of this season, I'm not sure where everybody was. And, they had a lot of eyeballs on the Cal game. People like what they saw. The Northern Illinois game, bit of a rock fight. I thought played really, really well. Their best offensive game under Sean Lewis against Colorado State. Again, not a great opponent, but a great performance, and then a really, really solid win. Backing it up against Nevada, I thought was really good for them. So, listen, there are lots of alternatives that aren't as good as this, and I for one, like, you got our attention. I think the Aztecs got our attention now with Fresno State out there in a couple of weeks. That should feel like a big game in the Mountain West Conference standings, even though all of these schools are leaving this conference. But it should feel like a big game in terms of what it means for the conference. So I give them a lot of credit. I would like to see this continue. This is good on the eye. This is not only just putting up wins in the win column, which we've learned over the years, a little level of dissatisfaction with the style that Rocky Long and then in the Brady Hoke had. But, this combines a little bit of good personality, flair, modern looking offense, and results. So it can be done, and it is being done right now. So good on them being one win away from bowl eligibility. I don't know what sort of standards existed for this fan base, but looking somewhere. Certainly you wouldn't expect the what is it, the bottom to fall out of this, but yeah, I mean, they could beat bad teams. I think that's part of becoming a good team. Like, there are stages to being a good team, and part of it is beating bad teams and beating them handily.
Yeah, you beat the teams that are in front of you on the schedule. We talked a little bit. I was saying about Shildt. Like, if Shildt leaves next year, people are going to be like, "Oh, the Padres got to win 90 games. They got to win 90 games. Otherwise, this is a failure." I think that's why me and maybe a couple other people this year have been keeping an eye on the Wisconsin Badgers, who have Danny O'Neil as their quarterback. They started the season 2-0, wins against Miami of Ohio and Middle Tennessee State University, I believe. In the last 4 weeks, they have lost to the University of Alabama, the University of Maryland, the University of Michigan, the University of Iowa. Next week, they take on Ohio State, the number 1 team in the country. A week after that, they take on Oregon, the number 8 team in the country. 2 weeks after that, they take on Indiana, the number 3 team in the country. Wisconsin might go 2 and everything this year. They might not win another game. Like, even the teams they're not playing even teams that are not in the top 10 is like Illinois. They were just in the top 10. Washington, very good football team. Minnesota, I don't know whether or not they're actually good this year. But, and his stats are, he's thrown as many interceptions as he has touchdowns. So things are probably looking a little bit better for Sean Lewis and the Aztecs than they look for Danny O'Neil and the Badgers. And that's great. Like, no matter how you look at Sean Lewis this year, compare him to last year, compare him to the quarterback he brought in last year, even kind of compare him to what was going on at Colorado when he was there. And it's like, it's looking good. It's looking good. And I think I told you as a UCLA football fan as well, I'm not going to give that up. I can root for both teams. The thing with Chip Kelly was always, we got to wait for Chip to get his guys in there. He's got to go through a couple of recruiting classes before you can evaluate him. And, Sean Lewis has now had 1.5 recruiting classes. The deeper we get into this, the more success they find, the more credit I'm going to give him for all of it.
I mean, that's why you hired him.
Yeah.
I mean, this literally is why you hired him, is not only to come in here and just coach teams to bowl games. Sean Lewis was hired to change the complexion of the whole program.
It looks like it's changing.
It does. And again, I always think you take this stuff with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
Because you do have to factor in who you're playing.
Yep.
But again, I would point out that based on what we have as evidence, then I think then this is part of becoming a good team is being no nonsense against bad teams. And that is a part of it. You can only take that analysis so far. But that's why I thought last week having a really, really efficient offense, one of the most efficient offenses, even though it's really tough to compare what Ohio State does in a different conference against a different opponent to what San Diego State did, against a not so great team in Colorado State. That being said, they showed an offensive efficiency that I don't think we've ever seen. So, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I remember the press conference was there. I remember them saying we brought him in here to modernize our program. We didn't just bring him in here because we thought he would be a valid replacement. We brought him in here to modernize our college football program. And, there's evidence to suggest that is happening, that it hasn't fully happened, but that it is happening. And I don't think we need to say this team is going to the college football playoff. We probably got ahead of ourselves last week, even talking about a conference championship. But there is plenty of evidence to suggest that they are getting exactly from Sean Lewis what it is that they wanted when they hired him, which is the more modernization of a 21st century college football program. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think they could put a scare into Boise State, which is more than you could say about any San Diego State team in a number of years. So that's something. That's something. Yeah.
Don't take the rat poison, as Nick Saban would say. Don't go taking the rat poison though, thinking that you've got this all figured out. There was a line in the Union Tribune today which made me laugh from Kirk Kenny. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Because it's sort of like it's like oh, well, people of, the same people who are saying this coach should get fired are now saying they're worried that he's going to get hired by another program. Those people aren't making much noise now. It's like, okay, how about we just enjoy this while it's happening here? It's 5-1. It's good. And it looks better seemingly all the time. So I think that's a credit to him. These things take time. You say that though, and the expectations have never been more ridiculous because in the era of transfer portals and NIL, these are sports, and this is a universe where you can turn a program around in 1 year, in your first year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fair to say, well, why was this just a 3-win season? This was really miserable. You got the coach, you got the quarterback that you wanted, but that will be a footnote in this. I mean, how demanding is it that James Franklin gets blown out? They're paying him $50-something million to not coach this team anymore. They went, I jotted this down here today, 34-8 over their last 3 years. They were 1 win away from the national championship game last year.
I know.
They lost to Notre Dame in the college football semifinal.
I know.
And they're just like, here's $50 million. Get out. Hit the road.
I mean,
it's a crazy universe that college athletics and sports that we reside in here.
I listened to a little bit of Bomani Jones this morning when I was taking my daughter to school, and he was pointing out, because he was like, this doesn't make sense. He's like, so I reached out to a bunch of college football people, like, how the hell do you fire this guy? Like 2 weeks ago, this was a contender for the national championship, and then you're just firing him after 2, not great losses, but 2 losses. And the reply seemed to be from everyone he talked to that like James Franklin's teams do a terrible job of beating good teams. His record against like top 10, top 15 schools is horrendous. And so I think they just looked at him and went, he's not going to get us to where we want to go. He's got a ceiling on him. I think that's a ridiculous thing to say, but I understand if that's where they want to be.
And I guess he got everything he asked for. He asked for more NIL money. He asked for more money for coaching, for his coaches staff. He asked for all of these things, and then they're 3-3. It's like, you asked for everything you got, and this team isn't any good.
Yeah.
So we are pulling the plug on this. Here's your $50 million to go away. I was thinking about that Ed Orgeron line that you and I were chatting about last week. What time do you want me to leave? And which way's the door, brother?
Yeah, what time do you want me to leave, and what door do you want me to go out of?
Yeah.
It's an incredible line.
I would do what a lot of other people have suggested they would do. If somebody gave me $50 million never to coach again, I would take it.
Yeah,
I would absolutely take that.
I'd have a great life after that.
I would. Yeah, but it is like the expectation. Ryan Day probably gets fired last year if there's not an expanded college football playoff. And maybe that's part of this too, is if you can't, if you can't even get us to the college football playoff because we're 3-3, So we're probably eliminated already 6 weeks into the college football season.
Yeah,
We're
season's over.
unlikely to go to the college football playoff.
Mhm.
Then you're out. Like if you can't even get us to that point, then we don't view you as the same guy. Ryan Day, the head coach at Ohio State, was given this opportunity. He probably would have been fired if there was no expanded college football playoff because they lost to Michigan again, and they would have been playing in a bowl game that wasn't a college football playoff bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
But he gets rescued by the system that might have cost James Franklin his job. So, it's a double-edged sword, as they say, John.
Yes, it is. By the way, AJ Preller, it is announced, will meet with the media tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. So we will. I know you have to go out to SDFC for training. We'll try and figure out if we can tape after that meeting and kind of respond to it. But I hope someone asks him the question: who were you on the phone with after Game 3? I want to know.
I'm sure somebody will.
Please.
Yeah, so we have all sorts of local media planting their flags too. Marty Caswell, there's no way that Mike Shildt was forced out.
No way.
No way. We'll see. Maybe there will be some reporting to suggest that he was. I'm curious to see how the day unfolds from the people who will have some stories to tell.
Yeah,
I'm very, very excited about that. So
I'm proud that neither one of us is making these types of. We're not planting our flag on. We know exactly what happened. No, we're just reacting to it. Maybe theorizing, but we don't know shit, man. And we're still going to learn a lot more.
And there's a non-zero chance that this is exactly what it is. Guy's tired.
I know.
He's tired, and he's made some money in baseball, and he lives a life in North Carolina that he wants to get back to, and this stuff takes a toll. It takes a toll.
Talked it over with his therapist, and they agreed that this was the best path for him or something. Yes, possible.
Yeah, and it's one of the questions that was asked, and now one of the questions that's been answered. Another one of the questions that's been asked is Preller coming back? That he's having a press conference tomorrow seems certainly to indicate that he is coming back.
It does.
Even though, again, I do think you'll hear a little bit about some interest in Preller, but it appears that was short-lived, relatively speaking, and he's the guy that will conduct this interview, and he's the guy that will be part of the process of hiring the next manager, the 9th manager of his tenure.
That's a lot. And again,
9 and
11,
10 years is, it's 11, I guess.
11 because he was hired early in 2015. 11 years is a really long time to be a GM of a team.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why I was listening to the Gwintelligence podcast, and they were trying to figure out, has any other GM ever got to hire 6 managers? And I think they were asking ChatGPT, and at one point they're like, we think this is the record. We think 6 is the record. They were like, if he gets to replace Shildt, we think he's tied with the record. Part of this because, A, you usually don't last that long. B, if you do last that long, it's because you've had incredible success, usually with the same manager the whole time, or for the majority of it. So it's a unique situation that we find ourselves in with AJ Preller and the San Diego Padres. It's going to be interesting.
I really thought we would talk a little bit about the story in The Athletic about the Phillies, because there was a story written last week about, it was written by Jason Stark, who's a Philly-based guy, and he's talking about another postseason disappointment. And just a couple of paragraphs here. What that means, it's too soon to say. Who's leaving, who's staying, who gets signed, who gets the boot is more complicated than 2 million talk show callers make it sound. That's very true. Some things are clear. The Phillies have a principal owner in John Middleton who isn't going to take this well. He's hyper aware of his frustrated fan base. He's going to push for change with his customers in mind. Phillies have a president of baseball operations, Dave Dombrowski, who's been there, done this before. He knows what has to happen at times like this. He will not be indecisive. He will not be nostalgic. He won't be afraid to do what leaders need to do when the ship runs this far from the course. Keep in mind, by the way, the Phillies and Padres are on similar pathways. Doesn't mean that the Phillies won't need a tough needle to thread. Blah, 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 blah. He goes on to say, hey, listen, they've tried it and they keep going back to this and it just isn't working, is the bottom line. 96-win team, won its division by 13 games, only team in the history of the National League that's increased its regular season win total for the last 7 seasons. And he's like, it's just this thing isn't working. It feels like it's the end of something. Was that the sense that the Padres had at the end of the third game against the Cubs? I don't know. But there are some like if you read this story and just inserted the word Padres for Phillies, it still would flow pretty well.
Yes, but like same thing if you inserted the word Cubs or Yankees, right? Like this is the thing that's a little bit crazy.
Yankees, yes, I don't think Cubs.
This is the thing that's a little bit crazy. The teams that lose in the playoffs, that had really good regular seasons, they lose in the playoffs, they go out, they don't even make the championship series. There's a story for almost all of them. Usually coming from the team going, this is not good enough. We need to make the changes we need to, review our organization, make the changes to get us to the World Series. The World Series is the goal. There's 30 teams. They're all trying to win the World Series. Only
they're
one
not.
of them can.
Why do you say that? They are not all trying to win the World
12
Series.
12 of them are.
Yeah. And not many of them have committed the way that the Padres and the Phillies have.
Okay. I suppose that. Well, okay, we can look at this. Like the Dodgers definitely have, right?
Right.
The Cubs have.
I mean, yeah, it's been a minute for the Cubs since they've been in the playoffs. I think they were last in the playoffs back in the COVID. So, it's been a little bit more of a but the point about the Phillies was like there has been this core, and this core hasn't figured out a way other than the one trip to the World Series, which we all would have died for back in 2023.
Yeah.
That this core is probably run its course. Now, what can you do there? I'm not clear. What can you do here with this core? I'm not so sure. I just thought it was a really interesting way of looking at the Phillies thing and then trying to say, does this apply to the Padres? Yeah, I mean, he goes through this exercise of saying, how many times do you have a core of players that just can't break through? And, I'm trying to find the one paragraph. How unusual is it for a team to keep bringing back the same stars for 2, 3, and 4 years in a row without winning a World Series? And his conclusion is it's not very common. And he has the evidence to back it up. His data points are a little bit different than what we're talking about with the Padres, but it's an interesting line. And again, I think it could be applied here, but just in a different way. But come on, man. Colorado Rockies aren't trying to win. White Sox aren't trying to win.
No, you're right. You're right. I just like for all of these teams to be like, we got to change something so we can get to the World Series. I'm like, there's 7 teams saying that, and only so many can actually get there and win it.
Yeah. I mean, it's the reason why the Dodgers were on the verge of making changes last year.
Yeah. And the Dodgers are the reason that everyone else is, like, we have to go. We have to go. We have to go. And it's like the Dodgers are just going to get in everyone's way. I hope I'm wrong. Go Mariners and go Brewers. Yeah.
We got a game tonight, don't we?
I'm sure there is. Actually, I think is there another Mariners game tonight?
No, I think it's Dodgers and
No, there is. Okay, so the Mariners Blue Jays play today, 2:00 Pacific.
Nice.
That's very weird for a Monday. I guess because Columbus Day. I don't know. Wait, what do they call that? Indigenous Peoples Day. Dodgers Brewers is at 5:00 tonight and tomorrow.
Looking forward to it.
Lots of good baseball.
Much better than whatever the Monday Night Football game is. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure it's not going to be good.
Man, I was watching Red Zone yesterday, and I caught the end of the Chargers game on the bike ride I was talking about. And every time I was watching a football game this week, I just kept thinking of you going like, there are no good teams. There really aren't any bad teams either. Every team is exactly the same level of good. And it's like, it's terrible to watch. It's terrible to watch.
I was out yesterday, also on a bike ride, and I was at Novo in Imperial Beach. And I was on the back patio, and they have these 2 huge screens, right? So one football game is on one screen, one football game is on the other screen. So it's the late window. On the left-hand side, the 4-1 49ers were taking on the 4-1 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And on the right screen, the 1-4 Tennessee Titans were taking on the 1-4 Vegas Raiders. If you didn't see the records of the teams, you would say it's the same game. It doesn't look any different. These two teams that combined for 2 losses versus these 2 teams that combined for 2 wins, you would not be able to tell the difference if they didn't put the records on the screen. You wouldn't be able to say, who are the shit teams, who are the good teams right here. You would have absolutely no ability to tell the difference between the 2. And it just sort of struck me like, it doesn't matter. 4-1, 1-4. It could have been a 4-1 versus a 1-4. It could have been a 4-1 versus another one. It would have been the same game.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been the same exact game. It is a crazy person sport. I've got to go. But I mean, reading some of the stuff that what happened to the 49ers yesterday is, can you tell me in what universe any of this makes sense other than the universe of pro football? Here are two reports from San Francisco reporters about the Niners. So unfortunately, Fred Warner broke his ankle yesterday. Good player, was on the Manning cast last Monday. I thought he's really good. Tim Kawakami tweets out, Mike Shanahan said that Fred Warner was in the locker room after the game, spoke to the team, helped break down the post-game huddle. He had a broken ankle, okay? Kawakami adds, I can't imagine the pain he's in right now, physical and emotional, but Warner is still leading this team. He dislocated and broke his right ankle early in this game, but hung around the locker room afterwards and broke down the post-game huddle. That was number one. Number two, they have a wide receiver named Juwan Jennings, who is questionable for this game. After the game, it was revealed why he was questionable. He has 5 broken ribs. John, if I had 5 broken ribs, I wouldn't do this podcast.
If I had 5 broken ribs, I would be on the heaviest drugs that I could get my hands on, and I would not be getting out of my bed.
And he's playing a football game as a wide receiver. I mean, this is a crazy person's sport. I mean, I'm sure people will say, "Oh, this is why football is great. It's tough, and there's valor." I don't find anything about any of those situations with any valor whatsoever. I just don't. I'm sorry. Like I think that is insane. Anyhow, not really where we wanted to go.
Manny Machado would play with 5 broken ribs.
Would he? Yeah, he would, because he would post.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
I'm sure Manny's like, let's get Juwan Jennings to be our next head coach. Man, that guy knows how to post.
He knows how to post.
All right, like I said, stay tuned. I'm sure there's going to be lots more coming here. I'm excited. I'm glad that Preller is going to be at the podium tomorrow at 10 a.m. Got to figure out how I'm going to watch that game, though, or watch that moment.
The fan says they're going to be broadcasting it live. So if you're in the car, you can listen to it, or I guess on the Odyssey app, you can listen to it. But I'm going to be trying to see if I can find a way to get the video feed of that. We'll see.
All right. All righty. Thank you, everybody. Like we said a million minutes ago, some of this stuff will clearly be a bit dated by the time any of you listen to it. So we were recording it between 10 o'clock and 11:43. We'll wrap it up. Thank you all for listening. Again, if you like it, don't like it, want a little bit more, you can sign up, you can subscribe, you can get a free trial for your subscription as well. So maybe today's the first day that you're exposed to Section 1904. Welcome in. Lots of things happening, and you can start your trial subscription right now at section1904.com. He's John. I'm Darren. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your Monday.